On today's agenda is the case of Pamela Shelly. Through a series of unfortunate oversights, a woman's passing was ruled as a self-inflicted act. And on the surface, it seemed like it actually was. But one detective named Carl knew there was more to the story, and over 12 years later, brought justice to Pam's name. On a winter evening in 2001, in the rural town of Cuero, Texas, a chilling 911 phone call was made. Dispatchers were informed that 32-year-old Pamela Shelly was found motionless in her bathroom with a bullet wound to the head. Most reports say Pam's boyfriend, Ronnie Hendrick, was the one who made the call, although at least one said it was Ronnie's stepdad. Regardless, the call was made and first responders were on their way. The police saw the pistol on the bathroom counter and red spatter everywhere. But here's what's weird. Pam's body was already removed from the scene. So this meant the police weren't able to see how Pam was positioned or anything. Important forensic details. But it seemed like they already knew what they needed to know based on the boyfriend's account. Officers wanted to pull Ronnie aside for a full interview, but he was already in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. All Ronnie told them was this: "I was outside when I heard a bullet ring from inside the house. When I ran into the bathroom, I found Pam covered in blood. Oh, and she was hardcore depressed about moving out of state, so that's probably what led her to do this." Now, to give you more backstory on Pam, she had 2 kids from a previous marriage, 12-year-old Kayla and 9-year-old Dustin. Pam was originally from Arkansas, but had been living with Ronnie and her 2 kids in Texas. And according to Kayla, Ronnie was very abusive and had assaulted Pam and the kids on multiple occasions. At that point, Pam knew it was time to leave Ronnie for good. The day of the incident, she'd packed up her things and made plans to drive back to Arkansas to live with relatives. Ronnie claimed that the reason for Pam and the kids moving was because he and Kayla didn't get along. And he said the only reason she decided to leave was because she would lose her kids if she didn't. Back at the hospital, doctors declared Pam brain dead, and they pulled her off of life support. Shortly after that, an autopsy was performed on Pam, and the medical examiner concluded that this was a self-inflicted act. One investigator on this initial case, named Carl Bowen, had a gut feeling that this wasn't as simple as everyone chalked it up to be. Yeah, I don't understand why everyone brushed off the part where Pam packed her things and was about to leave Ronnie, her abusive boyfriend. Also, Ronnie flaked on getting a polygraph test, and no other witnesses were subjected to a polygraph test either. Unfortunately, Carl wasn't in charge of making decisions on this case, so he couldn't really do much to fight back. But in 2008, 7 years after the initial crime, Carl had moved up in the sheriff's office, and his first task was to reopen Pam's case. During the new investigation, it was revealed that Ronnie had an extensive past of harming women. In fact, Carl discovered that Ronnie gave Pam a black eye the day before the incident. It was so bad she had to go to the hospital. That summer, as in 2008 when the case was reopened, Ronnie was brought to the DeWitt County Jail for beating up a woman he was living with. Right around that time, Carl discovered that since Pam's case, Ronnie had taken himself to South Dakota, where he got a DWI that sent him to jail for a bit. Carl convinced Ronnie to do a polygraph test about Pam's case, where it was proven that good old Ronnie lied in his polygraph test. When he was further pressed about it, Ronnie refused to speak and threatened to lawyer up. Carl noted Ronnie switched up an important detail of the story this time. When he first gave a statement in 2001, Ronnie said he was outside with the kids when the weapon fired. Well, in his new 2008 statement, Ronnie said he was in the room with Pam when she took her own life. Ronnie claimed he was too scared to mention that detail originally because he didn't want to be framed for doing it. Carl reached out to Pam's kids and spoke with them. Kayla maintained that Ronnie was aggressive, especially when he had had too much to drink, and they didn't like each other at all. She also mentioned he would hit her mom occasionally and truly believed he was the one who did this to her. But even with this new information Carl found and presented, it wasn't enough to get a retrial. In 2012, Pam's case was featured on the TNT show Cold Justice. Cold Justice is a true crime show that presents older, unsolved cases in hopes that it reaches someone who knows something about the case to help bring the victim justice. The reason Cold Justice ran an episode on Pam was because Carl reached out to them about it. In this episode, a former prosecutor, detective, and crime scene investigator all got together with Carl and Kayla to go over the case details. Pam was clearly dealing with a lot. She was living with a harmful man and clearly wanted a better situation for herself and her kids. Pam loved her kids and wasn't the type of person to leave her kids behind with a toxic and abusive man like Ronnie. Several relatives and friends told investigators that Pam would never take her own life. Pam's bestie actually said that they had a conversation a few weeks before the incident about this exact topic. A woman they both knew took her own life, leaving her kids behind. Pam said she'd never be able to do that. But Ronnie's brother said otherwise. He claimed Pam had talked about and even attempted to end her life previously. Pam's brother, on the other hand, said he recently spoke with his sister who sounded normal, despite the issues she was having with Ronnie. And here's another reason to believe Ronnie was the one who offed Pam. So he actually had two brothers, Michael and Shannon. Michael said he and Ronnie immediately rushed to the bathroom when they heard the bullet. They claimed they performed CPR on Pam. Ronnie's mom also said she helped with the CPR. Well, the paramedics who first showed up to help didn't see red fluid on Ronnie or Michael. They also didn't see any signs of CPR being done on Pam based on how her body looked. Ronnie's older brother Shannon told the investigators from Cold Justice that when he arrived at the scene, there was a game warden who collected Ronnie's clothes to run samples of the bloodstains and was dusting his hands for any residue from a firearm. That was a flat-out lie. Yes, a game warden did show up, but they never did any residue testing as they didn't have a kit. Ronnie's clothes also didn't have any fluid on them. During their recreations, the team of detectives determined Ronnie could have come into the bathroom with a firearm as Pam was getting ready. So even though the angle and the wounds seemed self-inflicted, this true crime show team just determined that it could have indeed been done by someone else. Now, due to technological advances, the firearm was finally able to be swabbed for DNA. But guess what? There wasn't any. And if Pam really did this, there would at least be some of her DNA on the weapon, which means it was wiped clean. With that, Pam's COD was officially changed from self-inflicted to undetermined. But Carl still needed more answers and more evidence to pin the crime on Ronnie. He tracked down Pam's ex-husband and the father of her two kids. His name is Jesse, and he was serving time in jail when Carl found him. Jesse agreed to talk to Carl about the incident and said he spoke to Pam and Ronnie that day. Apparently, Jesse and Pam were planning to get back together, and he was the one she and the kids were moving in with. Jesse said he was talking with Pam when Ronnie grabbed the phone and told Jesse the only way Pam would be coming back to Arkansas was in a pine box, meaning Ronnie verbally threatened to end Pam's life the day it actually ended. And we know Jesse was telling the truth because he was hooked up to a polygraph machine that detected no signs of deception. With this final testimony, Pam's case was taken to a grand jury. Ronnie was indicted in November of 2012, and his trial was set for September of the next year. Pam's episode aired on its original date before the trial, and everyone in Cuero tuned in. On the day of the trial, 1/3 of the prospective jurors raised their hands when asked if they'd seen the episode. Several of them admitted their belief that Ronnie was guilty, so due to their biases, a mistrial was declared. The judge rescheduled the case to the summer of 2014, but the district attorney knew this would continually be an issue. Even if they moved the location of this trial, Cold Justice was a national show and so many people had seen Pam's episode. So the DA approached Ronnie's attorney. He said, "Okay, we can't get a jury today, but we will get one someday, and the jury is going to hear everything that was on Cold Justice, plus about 50% more. Every person who saw Cold Justice, except for the one guy, thinks Ronnie did it. A jury is going to think the same thing." So with that, Ronnie pled guilty to slaying Pam just one day after the mistrial. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison, which seems a little light if you ask me. But ultimately, Pam's family was thankful to at least have answers and some form of justice in the eyes of the law. They knew it would be a rough road of trials ahead, so this outcome saved a lot of time and heartache. Thank you so much for watching Killer Bites. I'm Lucy, and I'll see you next time.